Nokia once controlled over 40% of the global smartphone market. Then, one CEO sent an internal email Nokia never recovered. This is the decision that ended the world's most powerful phone company. This wasn't a slow decline. Nokia collapsed in under 3 years. And it didn't happen because Apple was smarter, happened because leadership panicked at the worst possible moment. This is a story about how a single psychological mistake can bring down an empire. It's a lesson not just for business, but for any leader facing a moment of crisis. How you communicate change matters more than the change itself. Let's rewind to 2007. Nokia was untouchable. They were the undisputed global market leader in mobile phones. To put that into perspective, they sold more devices than Apple, Samsung, and BlackBerry combined. Their manufacturing power was legendary. Their supply chains were a work of art, and they had billions of dollars in cash reserves just sitting in the bank. They had everything. According to Nokia's own annual reports from that time, the company believed it had time. They saw the iPhone, they saw Android emerging, but they felt their dominance gave them a buffer. They could afford to wait, to analyze, and to react when the time was right. That belief, that sense of security, would become fatal. You see, Nokia wasn't sitting still. They were experimenting. They had touchscreens, they had app stores, they even had prototypes that looked remarkably like the smartphones of today. But they were a company driven by engineers and hardware perfectionists. Their internal operating system, Symbian, was complex but incredibly stable. It was the engine behind their global dominance. But the world was shifting. Apple's iOS and Google's Android weren't just about the phone. They were about the ecosystem, the apps, the user experience. Symbian started to look old-fashioned, clumsy. Internally, there were fierce debates about what to do next. Should they stick with Symbian? Should they build a new system from scratch, or should they adopt an outside platform? The company was powerful, but it was also paralyzed by indecision. And into this moment of uncertainty, a new leader arrived. In 2010, Nokia appointed Stephen Ulop as its CEO. This was a huge deal for a couple of reasons. First, he was the first non-Finnish CEO in Nokia's entire history. A major cultural shift for the proudly Finnish company. Second, and perhaps more importantly, he was a former high-ranking executive from Microsoft. His arrival signaled that big changes were on the horizon. From his very first day, Ulop made it clear he believed Nokia's internal software, Symbian, was doomed. He saw it as a dead end. Unable to compete with the slick, app-driven platforms from Apple and Google. He was probably right about that. In February 2011, Stephen Ulop sent an internal memo to all Nokia employees. This memo wasn't just any corporate communication. Former Nokia engineers later said the memo destroyed morale overnight. It was a psychological nuclear bomb. It was the end of an era. The king of mobile phones was dead. Years later, even Microsoft's own CEO admitted that the entire acquisition had been a massive failure, eventually writing off almost the entire value of the purchase. The fall of Nokia wasn't technological. They had the engineers, the patents, and the money to compete. It was psychological. The moment the leader declared the company was already lost, it was. Nokia didn't lose because it was behind. It lost because its CEO convinced the world and, more importantly, its own employees that it was. The Burning Platform memo is now a famous case study in what not to do. It teaches us that in times of crisis, a leader's most important job is to manage confidence. Sometimes, the most dangerous move you can make is destroying belief before you've built a credible replacement. It's a lesson that goes far beyond the world of tech and business. Thanks for watching. If you found this story interesting, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the decisions that shape our world.